The U.S. Supreme Court case that I decided to choose for this project was Al Gore versus George W. Bush during the year 2000 elections. I found that there were a couple things that seemed pretty similar to what are currently going on in our political system with the elections and everything, and I decided to start looking into the case, and I realized it showed a lot of flaws of our electoral college, and so that's why I chose this case. The U.S. Supreme Court case that I chose for this project was George W. Bush versus Al Gore in year 2000 during the presidential election. Election day was on November 7th, 2000. It was a very close race. During the night of Election Day, Republican candidate George W. Bush had 246 electoral college votes, and his opponent, Democratic nominee Al Gore, had 266. In the race to 270 votes, there was one state who had not came out with the results, and that was Florida. And Florida represented 25 votes in the Electoral College. That night, Al Gore received news that he was losing, so he called George W. Bush to congratulate him. Later that night, or the next morning, I suppose, at 3 a.m., Al Gore called George W. Bush when he found out the race was closer than expected to retract his statement. By the morning of November 8th, results were in and showing a win by around 600 votes for George W. Bush, declaring him the winner. In Florida, there is a law that calls for a machine recount if election results fall within a .05 margin. Because there were roughly 6 million people voting in Florida and only a difference of 600 people, that fell under a .01% margin. By November 10th, the machine recount was completed, and the results were that George W. Bush had won by 327 votes. Because, again, the results were so close, county officials tried to discern voters by blaming hanging chads, which are voter ballots that are indented but not fully pierced through, as well as undervotes and overvotes, especially with it being such a close race. Because of this, the Florida Supreme Court ruled that a recount by hand was needed in 4 counties, and all ballots that were disregarded must be counted in the final count. The Secretary of State for Florida at the time was Katherine Harris. She fully intended to certify results on November 14th, but with Florida Supreme Court ruling, Florida was given until November 26th to recount by hand. As soon as George W. Bush and his campaign heard about the news, they appealed to the United States Supreme Court to not allow the recount and to have previously determined results stay. The U.S. Supreme Court accepted the case the next day. On December 9, 2000, the U.S. Supreme Court ordered Florida to stop recounting and scheduled oral arguments for December 11th. The U.S. Supreme Court gave their decision the following day. On December 12th, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in a 5-4 ruling that the recount method violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment in the United States Constitution. The Supreme Court listed the ruling that was in violation of the 14th Amendment, Article 2, stating, "No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States." The Supreme Court stated that Florida could not sanction a recount by hand because all of the other counties and states were not counting by hand, and it would not be equal to the counties who did not count their votes by hand, making it ultimately unequal. The U.S. Supreme Court therefore gave all of Florida's 25 electoral votes to George W. Bush, which would be awarding him the presidency. With the U.S. Supreme Court voting 5-4, dissenting judges' opinions were that although the process is flawed and needs to be fixed, the state should be rewarded with more time to complete the recount. The majority of the judges and justices, however, found the methods of recounting to be a violation of the 14th Amendment. I chose this case for a couple of different reasons. I thought it was a pretty interesting case, and seemed pretty similar to some of the things that we're dealing with right now during our presidential election. Some of the things I felt were particularly interesting were George W. Bush's brother at the time was the governor of Florida, and the Secretary of State for Florida, Katherine Harris, who was pushing to have the state certify its results faster, or pretty much faster than the counties could actually count their ballots. She happened to work for the George W. Bush campaign, so there are definitely some inside ties there, I suppose. And it really just shows how many flaws we have in our electoral college system. And I personally think that they should have extended the amount of time that those 4 counties in Florida had. And I'm not sure that Al Gore would have won, but I think the judges and justices who kind of put it off as in, well, we just don't have the time to do that, so we just have to disregard that. It's pretty unfortunate to think if Al Gore did actually win, that would be the result of that. And I'd like to think that as we continue after this scenario that happened in year 2000 and the scenario that's currently going on, I would really hope that slowly but surely we start to change things.